Do you want to have the confidence to truly rock retirement? Well, I'm going to show you how on the Retirement Answer Man Show. Welcome to the show. My name is Roger Whitney. I am your host. I'm excited that you're here for this second episode of the first week of October. That's right. We're experimenting with something new. I love your feedback in our 6-Shot Saturday email. As I've walked the journey into retirement with clients over the years, I've noticed a pattern. And typically before retirement, there's a lot of concern and excitement and trepidation about making the transition successfully and leaving full-time work and having the money work, but also having the life and the rhythm of life work. And I was reminded just the other day, meeting with a couple that is about 2 years into retirement, and how comfortable they were with the rhythm of their life and the rhythm of how the money works. Now, sure, there's the concern of, are we spending too much, or what could we do? What things should we be thinking about? That was there, but the whole tone of the conversation was so much more chill and productive. And it really made me think about it, because this exact same couple about a year and a half ago were really worried and wondering how this is going to work, and really wanting to spend some money on some things, but not quite comfortable with doing it. And all the things that you might be feeling if you have not retired yet. How do we actually create a paycheck? How does that work? Where do we get the money from? How do we pay taxes if we're taking money out of an IRA? Just all these questions, because it's different. And now they're comfortable. And you see that in our Rock Retirement Club with the 500-600 members that we have in there. And some of them are on the verge of retirement, planning for retirement, and others have been retired for years. And you can see them helping each other gain perspective. Anything new is different. I just thought that's really important. The other thing that sort of tweaked it to me is I started something different in October. And what I'm doing sober October. So I'm cutting out alcohol and most flour if I can help it. But I switched my workouts, my exercise routine to the mornings. And I have always been an afternoon exerciser, 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And now I'm getting up around 5 in the morning to exercise. And it's different. I was worried. Am I going to be able to get up? How's this old body going to get moving? And so far, I've really enjoyed it. Don't be afraid of new. You just got to build that muscle. So what we're going to do today is focus on your questions from listeners. And we got some good ones today from Harvey and from Carl and Julie and David. If you have a question that would like to be answered on the show, you can go to rogerwhitney.com/ask Roger. And if you want to receive an email every Saturday morning with a summary of the show, with any resources that we mention, you can sign up for our 6-Shot Saturday email at rogerwhitney.com. I believe the form to just put your name and address there is right at the bottom. So you can check that out. But now let's go to answer some of your questions. So our first is from Scott, and it's really a comment, not a question. Scott listened to the series that Tanya and I did on women in retirement a couple months ago now. And Scott says, I really enjoyed Tanya on the show. I can tell she became more comfortable as the month went on. She added some good value in addition to yours. So thank you, Scott. I definitely shared this with Tanya. And as we're pivoting to these Q&A episodes, just to give you an idea, we're developing a cast of characters that will be joining me consistently. Tanya being one of them, Kevin Lyles, our head retirement coach in the Rock Retirement Club, Andy Panko, and a few others. So we'll have some cast of characters, and Tanya will definitely be one of them. Now, Harvey says, hey, Roger, I love your show, but it seems mostly tailored towards individuals who have saved or who make a lot of money. People are asking, how can I live on $10,000 per month? I'm wondering how I can live on $10,000 per year. Lots of laughs. I turned 60 this year. My life has been beset with ups and downs that have drained me financially. Job loss, divorce, child support, etc. You get the idea. What advice do you have for people like me And I know there are a lot of others like me who are playing catch up at this late stage in life. My 401k is under 50,000. I have no defined pension, but I recently received a significant pay increase that allowed me to clear out some bad debt. I can now increase my 401k contribution, add to my health savings account, etc. How do I go from zero to retired in 10 years? My house is not paid off for, and I have the usual bills. From my conversations in work, Harvey says, I believe I'm pretty typical and not the exception. I'm looking for a series for us, the late boomers. And Harvey is 60 years old. So Harvey, we did a retirement plan live with someone who lives on a very modest annual budget. You can check that out at rogerwhitney.com. If you click on free resources, we have the replay. Trying to think of the name of it. That's one thing we'll put a link to in Six Shots Saturday. And for you, Harvey, there's only so much catch up that you can do. And first off, you didn't sound like you had this, but if you do, I want to encourage you to just give yourself permission to close out the past. Divorce, bad decisions, child support. It's easy to marinate in, man, what could I have done? What the heck was I thinking? Trust me, I went through a whole process of having to put a lot of that away. You're at where you're at. How do you rock retirement given the resources and your stage in life? So just want to make sure. You didn't sound like you were worried about that, but let's move forward and make a great life. For you, Harvey, you are very normal, and Social Security is going to be a big part of the equation for you. So you're going to want to think about, how do you maximize your Social Security? That could be working longer so you can contribute more to increase your primary insurance amount, which is based off of a formula on the 35 years highest earnings in your working history. So you want to do anything you can to try to increase what your ultimate Social Security benefit will be. So my first suggestion here, Harvey, is number one, go to ssa.gov. If you haven't already, register and download your Social Security benefit statement, because that's going to tell you what your Social Security benefit will be when you're eligible. And it will also show you the years of income that you've had. So maybe working a couple more years at work will allow some of the low income years to roll off and be replaced with higher income years. So that's number one. And related to Social Security, you're going to have to navigate when you take it. You can take it at age 62 at a reduced benefit. You can take it at quote unquote full retirement age, which for you is probably 67 or maybe a little bit below. And you can delay taking Social Security up to age 70. And so for you, this is going to be a pretty important decision, because every year you delay taking Social Security, the annual benefit goes up by about 8% a year up to age 70. And so every year you can delay is going to give you a permanent increase in your Social Security payment that will be inflation adjusted for as long as you live. So that's going to be a big part of the solution for you. So you want to figure out, how do I maximize the benefit? And then also, how do I delay taking Social Security so I can turn it on at a higher level earlier? Actually, I mean later in life, right? Later in life. Now, what do you do with this big raise you got? Congratulations, by the way. Yes, you can contribute to your 401k. You can contribute to the health savings account. Perhaps you could start a Roth IRA. And then you talked about paying off car payments and mortgage, etc. I think you can do a little bit of all of those, right? I'm not that concerned about a Roth IRA, depending on what your income level is. I don't know if saving tax deferred has a huge bang for its buck. It may be saving after tax. Well, let me think through this. Okay, so why don't you consider contributing to the 401k, at least is to the level that you're getting the employer match. So you get that free money. From there, I would consider building up some cash reserves, a contingency fund for life smacking you in the face, so you don't have to go to touch those assets later on. And then consider creating a debt snowball, as Dave Ramsey would say. Because for you, your monthly payments and how much it costs you to live each month is important. So now that you have this increased income, the more that you can decrease the monthly obligations that you have to pay, the more money it ultimately gives you to remain in your retirement accounts or your savings accounts, and the more money that you could contribute to these things after you take care of some debt. And that's just going to take a little bit of math, and I don't have enough context to really guide you through that. But I would consider a combination of those things. Now, do you pay off the house? Again, it's hard to know. Even if one way you would want to think about it is, well, how quickly could you pay off the house if you put every dollar towards it? And that's going to be a function of what's the balance on the mortgage and whether you plan on living there long term. But if you calculate, hey, even if I threw every extra penny at this mortgage, it's still going to last for the next 15 years. If that's the case, I probably wouldn't focus on trying to pay that off because it's not going to improve your monthly cash flow situation anytime soon. So someone in your situation really wants to focus on improving the monthly cash flow situation because that's going to be the requirement that you have to get from your income or from Social Security or tapping your assets. And if paying off the mortgage isn't going to happen for 15 years, even if you threw every last dollar at it, you're never going to have access to that money after you put it towards the mortgage unless you sell the house. So I'm not as concerned about that. I think another thing that you could do is really focus on creating an environment that doesn't cost a lot of money. You don't need $10,000 a month. The case study that I mentioned, and we'll have a link to it in 6 Shot Saturday, I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, but they lived very comfortably. I think their budget all in was like $35,000 a year, $35,000, $40,000 a year. Now, I think they had a paid-for house, and you don't, so that might change the numbers. But having a rocking retirement isn't about spending a lot of money. It's about creating an environment where you can live the best version of yourself. So those are some of my thoughts, Harvey, but I do appreciate you pointing out, hey, talk to all of us, the ones that are a little bit behind, the late boomers. It's a good point, and maybe we'll do a series on that in the future. Thanks so much, Harvey, and best of luck. Our next question comes from Carl on net unrealized appreciation. Carl says, hey, Roger, do you have any knowledge about NUA tax treatment, net unrealized appreciation? I want to diversify, but I have a lot of company stock, about $650,000 in a 401k, assume, and a cost basis of about $130,000 that I paid for it within this 401k. At what point is it worth diversifying or not diversifying? Good question, Carl. And net unrealized appreciation is one of those quirky things. So what exactly is it? It's a provision in the federal tax code that allows certain distributions of company stock from a company's qualified plan, like a 401k plan. So a lot of companies, if you have a 401k, they either contribute stock to your 401k or you have a mechanism of buying stock or buying into the company over a long period of time. And then when you get close to retirement within your 401k, some people I've seen had significant portions, in your case, $650,000 worth of the company that you work for. And now you're getting ready to retire. So what the provision in the tax code allows you to do is when you retire, that you take that employer stock, in this case for Carl, the $650,000, and distribute it from your 401k just into a personal account. Directly from the 401k, in this instance, to a personal account. And then you would pay income taxes on the distribution, but you wouldn't pay income taxes on the $650,000, the value. You would only pay income taxes on your cost basis. And Carl said that's $130,000. So in this instance, Carl could take the company stock, pay income tax on the $130,000, and now own the company stock in his own name, not in a 401k, that's worth $650,000. Now, once you do that, as long as you hold the stock for more than 1 year under current tax law from the date that you receive the stock, then you can pay long-term capital gains rather than ordinary income tax rates. Because if Carl had just sold the stock in the 401k and then distributed the money, all of it would be at his tax rate, which can go up into the 30% plus. And right now, long-term capital gains are 0%, 15%, or 20%, rather than potentially 37%. So that's the value of doing a net unrealized appreciation or an NUA transaction. If he sold the stock after doing this in less than 1 year, then it would just be like ordinary income taxes. Now, one last provision, and Carl, I'll get to some thinking through your question, but I want to make sure we understand what this is. One quirky thing about the tax code is if you're trying to do this, you can't move your company stock that's in a 401k to an IRA and then do this. You can't do it that way. It has to come directly from the 401k. So if you retire and decide, hey, I'm moving my entire 401k to an IRA, and then you realize, hey, this net unrealized appreciation thing's sort of cool, you've already negated doing it. You can't do it. Okay, so Carl, you have a couple issues to think through here because you have, I don't know your net worth, but you have a significant amount invested in one company. And that elevates the risk of if that company does poorly, it becomes an Enron or potentially a General Electric and just simply goes down in value. That $650,000 could be worth a lot less, a lot more very quickly if the die roll wrong in terms of how the company is managed. So you have that elevated risk of a lot of money in one company. So your options are, one, you could just keep it in the 401k. You could sell the stock in the 401k and diversify it. And now you don't have any tax consequence in that current year, right? But you still accomplished diversifying out of one company stock. Alternatively, you could move it to an IRA, sell the stock, and then diversify without any tax consequence in any one year, and then ultimately withdraw it strategically as you need it. And you may end up being roughly in the same tax bracket if you have enough other assets. So when you retire, Carl, that you're in a low tax bracket, let's say a 12% tax bracket anyway. If you did this, you would be able to take money out, say systematically over a number of years up to the top of the 12% bracket and actually pay less tax than paying income tax on the $130,000 plus long-term capital gains by just strategically making withdrawals from the tax deferred account. So that's one option that would allow you to diversify your portfolio without having the major tax hit all up front. So another option is you pay the income tax on the $130,000, wait 1 year, and then sell the stock to realize long-term capital gains. Now, why might you do that instead? Well, one reason might be if you're sitting in a position, Carl, where you don't really have a lot of after-tax assets. Maybe you're really overweighted in tax-deferred assets. This might be a good way for you to build up the second bucket of after-tax assets as efficiently as you can, right? You pay the tax on the NUA transaction, you wait a year, and then you sell the stock and you pay 20%. And now you don't have to tap your IRA as quickly. So some of this will depend on what position that you're in. So this would it could give you an opportunity to diversify your tax buckets and fund your lifestyle in order to do other things with your tax deferred money, either let it grow tax deferred, or maybe it helps you do Roth conversions a little bit earlier. You can see how this can get complicated. So here's how I would suggest that you figure it out. This is at least the way I figure it out, Carl. Create your plan of record let's say the plan of record is, Carl, that you map out your retirement cash flow plan of how much you think you need to spend. You map out your resources of income sources that are going to pay for some of that lifestyle. And then you map out how you're going to cover the difference from your assets. And let's assume you just keep everything in the tax deferred account. And then you create a plan of record where at least over the first 5 years, you have some clarity on where you're going to be tax bracket wise if you just leave it in the 401k and pay for life, either from IRA withdrawals or from after-tax assets. Once you have that plan of record, that gives you the first version of retirement. And it's really important to have that because once you have the first version of just doing it the normal way, don't do the NUA and just pay without after-tax assets, then you can create a what-if scenario and say, well, what if, rather than do it this way, what if I did the NUA? And now you can calculate roughly what the tax would be in that first year and the second year and maybe the first 5 years and see how that changes the balance sheet and your overall tax liability, say over 5 years. Unless you have a plan of record, we're dealing with vapor. We're dealing with just hypotheticals. So it's really important to have a plan of record so you can make these comparative analyses. It's much more important than you think because otherwise we're trying to conceptualize all this in our head and we're just not able to. It's too multi-dimensional to be able to just sit there and think about it. That's why I like to create a plan of record. And that way you can complete the what if scenario and then make a judgment call. All right, our next question is from Julie on changing strategy due to one salary household. So Julie says, hey, Roger, thank you for all you do. Love the show. That's awesome. Julie says, my husband lost his job and is going to take some time off to figure out career plans. Unlikely to continue in his exact field. It's a bump down the road, but we still plan on retiring in the next 5 to 6 years. So here's my story, Julie says. We're both 50 and both of us have combined assets of 1.5 million in 401k and rollover IRA. So most of that tax deferred. We have 6 to 8 months emergency fund and after-tax accounts, plus $50,000 in a brokerage account, which we contribute to. We're debt-free except for one car loan, $220 a month, and a mortgage, about $140 remaining on it. Living on one salary of $160,000 per year for 8 months. We have 2 teenage kids, but all their tuition is paid for. Based on the current situation, I recently significantly reduced my Roth 401k contribution, which had been maxed out, and redirected funds to the Vanguard brokerage account, and I stopped contributing to my IRA. And she thinks it's a good idea to shift to fund the brokerage account to help carry us for the few years before we reach 59 and a half, when we can start drawing from our pre-tax assets penalty-free. And we'll be in a lower income tax bracket. Then we can think about Roth conversions later on. And she basically wants to know, does this seem like a good strategy? So Julie, there's a lot that I don't know. So I'm just going to try to think through this with what you shared with me. One is, can you live off of your salary alone? It sounds like you can while your husband figures all this out. And I don't know what spending level you guys are going to need now and also in retirement. But I do think it's a good idea, and was a good idea, that you slow down your retirement savings, at least initially, so you can start to build up after-tax cash. Now, obviously, you have 8 months or so of emergency funds, and that's beautiful. And so now you're going to have to figure out, number one, how quickly is your husband going to go back to work? And roughly how much will he make? Let's say he left a job where he's making $100,000 a year, but now after reimagining his life, he would really rather have a more reasonable pace of life where he made $30,000 a year. And that's not necessarily a bad decision, right? But that $30,000 can still help extend contributing to the household expenses and allow both of you to have maybe a more reasonable pace of life. So I think that's a great opportunity right now for him to do that. And you want to have a timeline on when he figures that out. Otherwise, it's a little hard to plan. So in this case, what I would do is make a what if scenario from your base plan. It's like, what if my husband goes back to work in 1 year and makes $30,000 a year, and I continue making your $160,000 a year until age 55? Will we have a gap in what it costs to spend our life, and how much free cash flow, or how much free cash flow will we have between our income and our spending? Because that free cash flow, now you can figure out where is the best place to direct that. I would contribute to your 401k, at least to a minimum of the employer match. And then it's going to be, do I contribute to a Roth for my husband or myself, or do I continue to contribute and build up after-tax assets? I tend to like after-tax assets or Roth assets at this point in life, because generally, like you, Julie, most people are way over allocated to pre-tax assets. Now, if you can work at least until age 55, Julie, and then retire after age 55, you'll be able to access 401k assets using the rule of 55 without a penalty. So for you, at a minimum, I would target after 55. That way you don't have to wait 59 and a half. And until you figure all this out, I would pay the minimum all debt, because one, debt is extremely inexpensive, interest rate wise. And two, it'll allow you to build up after-tax savings and reshift where you're putting any excess cash flow. Now is the time, Julie, to rebuild a plan that seems feasible. Most likely, it sounds like you had a plan in place. Now you've been thrown this curveball. Now it's, okay, what is feasible for this new version of ourselves? And that's going to be building that cash flow plan. And it's not a plug for it, but that's what the master class in the Rock Retirement Club does is it lets you map this out step by step so you can see it in a spreadsheet and in a planning tool, and then play with what if scenarios. If you don't have that, it's a little hard to think through it, but it sounds like you're not in a bad position. The key variable here, Julie, really is going to be, what does your husband reimagine? And how will that contribute to the household from a financial perspective? All right, our last question comes from David on Social Security. David says, can you clear up confusion on my part? If my early retirement years are prior to full retirement age for Social Security, I may decide to take Social Security in my Social Security payment early to lessen the withdrawal rate of my 401k. Virtually every calculator I've tested shows long-term portfolio is better taking Social Security early and saving my 401k for later. So David asked, number one, does Social Security consider 401k income towards the earning limits for Social Security? Number two, does 401k income is taxable at the federal and state level at normal income, correct? Yes. Thanks for your insight. So to summarize, David wants to retire before his full retirement age and wants to know how taking 401k withdrawals interact with Social Security. So let's think through this for a second. So first of all, full retirement age, FRA, is the age that you can take your full retirement benefit without the risk of reduction because of earned income. Generally, it's right now 67 for some and 66 for older folks. So if you take your Social Security benefit after full retirement age, the system will penalize you by making up to 85% of your Social Security payments taxable based on the income you earn year by year. And traditional 401k withdrawals would count as income in determining the level in which your Social Security is taxed. So yes, a 401k distribution is going to count as income that could cause your Social Security to be taxed. So would a Roth conversion. Now, if you take your Social Security before your full retirement age, David, the Social Security Administration can penalize you for taking Social Security early if you have income above a certain threshold. So if you take your Social Security early and you earn income above the threshold, they will actually reduce your Social Security payment. Now, that doesn't go away forever. What they end up doing, so let's say you get $100 a month and they reduce your Social Security payment to $75 a month because you've earned too much income, that $25 that you didn't get doesn't go away. What they do is when you do reach full retirement age, they'll recalculate your benefit to help you recoup that $25 a month that you weren't getting. And they essentially amortize it over like 20 years or 15 years or something. So you'll get it back, but earning income will penalize you if you take your Social Security early. And that amount is the exempt amount you can earn before having $1 in Social Security benefits withheld for every $2 of earnings is about 20 grand. So in this case, traditional 401k asset withdrawals don't count. So they're going to count to make your Social Security taxable or not when you're over full retirement age, but traditional 401k IRA withdrawals prior to full retirement age aren't going to be counted to lessen your benefit. So your question, David, is, do I start my Social Security early so I can lessen the withdrawals from my 401k? Or do I take more from my 401k in order to have a higher Social Security benefit later? Here's how I would think about it. I think of Social Security a little bit different in that it is longevity insurance. It is a guaranteed payment that will last for as long as you live, and that guaranteed payment is inflation adjusted. That is a huge benefit that I would suggest that you focus on maximizing. And every year that you wait to take Social Security will increase that secure payment by about 8% a year up to age 70. So although the calculator may show that the value of your assets may be higher, there's many more factors that are involved there in terms of the Social Security benefit. And one example is by having your 401k or retirement assets grow over time, it may look on a gross level that it's a higher amount, but now you're going to have larger RMDs. You're going to have a larger tax liability on a larger amount. And it may be nice on paper, but I think it's important to think about some other factors as well, such as if you maximize your Social Security benefit, it's going to take a lot more stress off of managing the overall plan as you age. So if we get more towards the qualitative aspects of it, it's going to give you a higher payment that will help cover long-term care, regardless of markets. It will be inflation adjusted, regardless of what inflation is. It's not going to be subject to market up and downs, and you're going to have this natural flow of money that you really can't recreate inexpensively by buying an immediate annuity or something like that. So I would actually lean the other direction, David, and say I would focus on trying to maximize Social Security benefits. And again, I'm only thinking through this with the information that I have. Well, I want to thank you so much for all of your questions. And if you have a question for the show, you can go to rogerwhitney.com/Ask Roger. So far, I think I'm liking this new format. It's only week 1. And we're getting a little clunky, but we'll get it down. I think I like it because it gives us more room to try to think through some of the issues rather than having to fit it in. So hopefully we can give you more robust and in-depth answers to help you rock retirement. Have a great weekend. Hey, it's time for that all-important disclaimer. We so appreciate you listening to the show and love your questions and love the teaching that we're able to provide here. And actually, it helps us too. But remember, you're not our clients.
Not love it if you took advice from us on the show.
We would not love it if you took advice from us on the show. Realize this is helpful in education. Talk to your legal advisor, your tax advisor, or your financial advisor before you make any decisions.
We appreciate you joining us today for this episode of Retirement Answer Man. Be sure to visit rogerwhitney.com/answers to access the Retirement Answer Library with over 30 checklists to help you make the most of the only life you have. Remember, you have more power than you realize to create an amazing life starting today with Retirement Answer Man. The opinions voiced in this material are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. All performance referenced is historical and no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly. Have a wonderful day.